Welcome back to the Puckn Pod. On today's episode, we discuss the most recent game between the Edmonton Oilers and Vancouver Canucks. We also talk about Major League Baseball and the LA Dodgers. And it's another round of this or that, followed by some discussion on the California wildfires. Finally, we talk about movie genres and their influence on us over the years. That's all coming up next, right here on the Puckn Pod. Let's Puckn go! Boy, oh boy, we have one hell of a lot of stuff to talk about, and it's all controversial, all of it. I say let's get right into it. Paul, what do you want to start with?
Well, it's about bloody time that Ryan Reaves got into a fight. $1.35 million a year, I guess, for a fight is what the goal of the contract was.
Yeah. And what's funny about that fight, and I'm giddy because I love it, right? And it's about time. He's doing his job. That's why he's there. He's not even there to put up 5 goals. Yeah. Really. Like, never mind 20 or 30. He's there to put up 5 fights. He's there to put up 20 or 30 hits a game. This is Ryan Reaves that the Leafs were hoping they signed 2 years ago for, like you say, $1.35 million. So to be 48 games into the year now and having your first tilt. I mean, he hasn't played every game, but he's played 2/3. He's played a majority because he's a Berube player.
Yeah.
Right? And his first fight, and it wasn't even like a scrum, let's see what happens here. There was a bad hit. I'm going to grab this guy and start feeding him. It was one of those show fights that the NHL hates, which I don't really care because I love it.
Well, it's old school hockey, right?
I mean,
ultimately, that's what the fans like to see. The majority of fans like to see, and we as fans like to see it too. It's one of those things where you look at it like, what it's supposed to do is elevate your team on an energy level, right? And that's what Reaves is there for, like you say. I think he definitely did his job that, finally after all these games.
Well, it's one thing to have scare tactics. I think that's what a lot of people say about Reaves. He's there to scare the other opposition into not being too overly aggressive so that you protect the other players. But the thing is, you have to actually be imposing, and he hasn't been much this season up until probably this fight and maybe a few other games previous to that. It's it's a bit concerning having a cap hit for a guy that's not really fulfilling the role that was assigned to him, at least maybe by the fans, maybe not so much management, but assigned to him when he got signed in Toronto.
So from my perspective, I would disagree with you a little in the fact that I would say I believe that Reaves' presence has helped with the aggression from opposition teams towards Toronto star players. I believe just having him on the bench has stopped players from going after Marner, going after Matthews. How many times did Matthews... I mean, I've seen a couple this year. Jamie Benn did it the other night, a week or so ago. But how many times have people given Matthews that cross-check in the back in the last couple of years? They were doing it consistently up until the last couple of seasons. So I would argue that Ryan Reaves' presence is being felt in a way, but I do agree with you where he needs to earn his cash, and being a pain in the ass would help with that. Finishing your check, he's not fast enough to finish his checks. That's why he's not finishing his checks. But I mean, it almost seemed like the entire season he's been injured or something, because you can see that it almost seems like he doesn't want to finish his checks. Even last year, when he would hit somebody, you could hear it through the building. Now it's like he bounces off of them. He's not doing it with the same force.
Hesitant, maybe, too.
Yeah, so I would argue that I do think his presence is felt enough that it is deterring some guys. Because let's face it or not, Ryan Reaves is one or two toughest guys in the league. And maybe the other person that's one or two is the guy that he fought. Yeah, in Olivier. What do you think about Olivier? That was his 10th fight of the year, by the way. Reaves' first.
Well, Columbus has seen improvement this year. Maybe he's there, Ryan Reaves, if we're looking at comparisons. But 10 fights to 1, that kind of says a lot about maybe the grit factor. Berube has, I think, made the Leafs more of a grittier team. Reeves, in my opinion, is just he's too overpaid, and he has done dirty things, like even his suspension earlier this year on Darnell Nurse and the hit to the head. Like maybe it wasn't intentional, but nonetheless, it looked pretty dirty when the hit happened.
I agree. Like that was a bad hit, and he deserved to be suspended for it. The funny thing about that is that that's one of the only times all year I've seen him actually be aggressive, and that's what happened. So now, is that a deterrent for him? Is he trying to play a little softer? Because in my opinion, he was playing pretty soft up until that point anyway. But, if you go the opposite way and look at a guy like Olivier, he's contributing, man. He's got 10 goals and 8 assists this year.
Wow.
That's crazy.
In the role that he has.
It almost sounds like he's playing kind of the Matt Rempe role, for Columbus versus, say, New York, right? Because Rempe's putting up points too. And of course, he's still a physical presence too. Like that, he plays that role.
I was listening to the JD Bunkis podcast earlier today, and he had mentioned Rempe and basically said that he's kind of the fakest tough guy they've ever seen because he'll fight anyone, but he'll get the crap kicked out of him by everyone. He's just big. He can't fight.
But at the same time, I think you would argue that that's still somebody you'd want on your team because at least he's sticking up for your teammates and he's not afraid to fight people because there are people. You have a big player on your team who is a fighter, but there are certain players he won't fight against, right? Because he knows he's going to lose. It's like they're afraid to lose, whereas Rempe's not afraid to lose.
That's one of the reasons I believe Ryan Reeves hasn't fought more than just once this season, is because there's a lot of guys that don't want to fight him. Yeah. He's a tough, mean guy. Could you imagine getting rocked by that?
Yeah.
Like, your jaw could be broken in 3 places.
Yeah.
The bench, the locker room, and the dressing room. So, I mean, 3 places.
Speaking of jaw breaking,
I can't even hold a straight face with that terrible joke.
Speaking of jaw breaking, we've got a lot of discussion to talk about. A lot of stuff that's been happening over the past week or so. Last Saturday, the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks faced off against each other. And me as a Canuck fan, I thought going into this game that it was going to be a clear win for Edmonton because Vancouver's been struggling so much lately. But it ended up being a Vancouver win, 3-2. But that was not the discussion. The discussion, of course, is what happened in the last few seconds of the game. We've got 2 players who are officially suspended for 3 games. And most notably, and this comes back from what I was discussing in a previous podcast, most notably, one of those players being suspended for 3 games is Connor McDavid. Finally getting his due justice. He cross-checked Connor Garland in the face, and that's 3 games. Tyler Myers is the other player, cross-checking Bouchard in the face, 3 games. Both of which I agree with what the NHL has done, and that is 3 games each, one not more vicious than the other, because in the end, they both were intent. They both were trying to attack the other player. I saw an interview with Tyler Myers after the game where he said, I f***ed up, basically. That was my f*** up. I shouldn't have put my stick up. I was trying to hit him. I'm much taller than he is, and just, the way your body naturally puts it in front of you, I hit him in the face, and I screwed up. Like, he admitted to the fact that it was a mistake, and that he should be suspended for what he did, because it is a mistake. McDavid, on the other hand, he's being kind of wrestled with Connor Garland, and of course the big argument with Oiler fans is that Connor Garland should have been called for a penalty, which I agree with. He should have been called for a penalty for holding. And that the once the ref blew the whistle, then the whole cross check from McDavid never would have happened. Well, I don't necessarily believe that's true because you don't know what happens after a whistle. I've seen penalties before where a whistle's blown and they still fight after the whistle.
Well, Myers cross check on Bouchard had nothing to do with the Garland McDavid case.
Absolutely,
so there you go. It happens.
It does happen. So there's no saying that it wouldn't have happened, and there's no saying that it would have happened. So I'm not going to say that Oiler fans are wrong. I'm not going to say that they're right either. The fact of the matter is, McDavid finally got justice for something that he did. In this case, it was a vicious hit, right? It's a cross check to the face. Anybody who does that, whether it's Garland to McDavid, that's a suspension. We can argue all day long about how many games he should have got versus how many he did. It doesn't matter in the end. Finally, he's being called for something rather than getting away with murder. And I mean, I use that term loosely. I don't literally mean he's out there murdering guys, but like, that specific game, I'll even point out 2 examples. He got away with a trip. He got away with a high stick on a player. Like, these are things that he's getting. He literally jabbed a guy in the face with his stick, and he didn't get called for it during the game. And it's right in front of a ref. Like, these are the things that I laugh about and I get upset about, because just because he's a star player, he's getting away with things. But, a cross-check to the face is not something that the refs can easily say, oh, we didn't see that, because they were watching it the whole time. They obviously purposefully didn't blow their whistles to call a penalty on Garland or McDavid, but they saw him cross-check him in the face. That's a guaranteed penalty. And they called it right. They gave him a match penalty, just like Tyler Myers, and that's why they got suspended. So, in the end, the whole discussion that seems to be happening on social media is the argument that that the funny thing is all the Oilers fans saying we stand in solidarity with McDavid and blah 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 blah. The guy cross-checked somebody in the face, so I'm not sure what you're standing in solidarity of. And they're acting as if he was the one who was cross-checked in the face, and that's the thing that we on the outside of Edmonton are having a hard time with. And so it's just for me, I just find it funny and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, it brings into question preferential treatment in pro sports, right?
Yeah.
You see stuff like that even in the NBA with LeBron, where he either flops or he overreacts to like having like the air grazed by his face, and just the other team getting a foul call or something like that when nothing actually happened at all. And it kind of like if you have McDavid maybe who in his own mind isn't doing a dirty play, but everyone else can see it, especially fans that are not fans of the Oilers, seeing that he's doing a dirty play. And then he's not getting called, as you mentioned, by the refs. It comes across as preferential treatment. You have even some people out there like Sid Sixera on X.
My God.
He made mention that McDavid's reaction to being held the way that he was by
justified.
Garland was justified. And I'm like, how is it justified to take something that's hard, that can break teeth, that can break bone, and smash it into someone's face?
Yeah.
Austin Matthews got a suspension for putting a stick into the back of Rasmus Dahlin's head.
Yeah, was it the back or the side of his head? I think
It was just like the side.
Yeah.
And it rode up his neck a little bit. Yeah.
And then Morgan Riley retaliated against Ridley Gregg scoring an empty netter and went to go hit him. Riley argued that he meant to go lower and his stick went too high, but nonetheless, if you're going anywhere around the shoulders and above, you could cause
even if it's an accident.
damage.
Even if it's an accident, it's still a justifiable penalty.
You have to keep control of your stick, right?
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing when you say when players argue when they get a high sticking penalty and they hit somebody in the face because they lifted their stick up, but they meant to lift their stick but they missed. Well, that's still a mistake, and you're still getting a penalty because in the end you don't have control of your stick. Right, and so that's the whole argument, right?
And it is suspension worthy. Like there are where you're falling over and your stick flies up, and you accidentally hit somebody in the face. That's accidental, but intent to hit and whether you meant to go low or not, as soon as it makes contact, basically neck and above, you can end somebody's not even their career but their life if it hits in the wrong spot. It is a justifiable offense for suspension. I would say almost every single time.
Now, you talk a little bit about integrity and how, LeBron kind of waves his head back and gets calls for fouls and things like that. The other night, Brady Tkachuk, which, this will be about the extent of the props I give him. But at the same time, I kind of think he's an idiot, well, to be honest. But he actually, I don't know who the opposition player was, but someone high-sticked him, quote unquote, and his head kind of shot back in a natural reaction. And the referee called the high stick, and Brady Tkachuk said, no, he didn't even touch me.
Yeah.
They said, it was just a reflex.
Natural reaction,
for my head to kind of get out of the way of his stick because I saw it coming up. And they ended up overruling and not calling a penalty. Well, why would you do that, for one?
Yeah.
I like to say that I'm a pretty, honest dude, but this is a professional sport. You're trying to win the Stanley Cup.
That's right.
I'll take any power play you give me, thanks. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, there you go, right? There's a little bit of yin and yang. So to speak, about integrity in the game and those situations about preferential treatment and whatnot. The most bizarre thing coming from this situation, in my opinion, is that the Edmonton Oilers released a statement about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And they said I'll read it out to you guys. It's interesting because in a little bit we've got some feedback coming from an Oilers fan, a lifelong Oilers fan, by the way, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. You guys will be like, this guy needs to get a life, but trust me, his life is pretty freaking cool if you were to see his man cave. Anyway, the Oilers released a statement saying, the Oilers organization is disappointed and we share in our fans' frustration over the 3-game suspension of our captain, Connor McDavid. We support him through the process, and the organization and our fans look forward to having him back in the lineup versus Seattle next week. You support him through the process?
Yeah,
the guy's not going having a mental breakdown here. He's not an alcoholic. He's not going through like the player assistance program. He cross-checked a guy in the face. He's going to lose what? The equivalent of $5 to you and me?
Yeah, I mean, it was
salary?
I think for him, I mean, it's funny when you compare the difference in what Tyler Myers is losing versus what he's losing. Tyler Myers is losing something like $50-something thousand, whereas McDavid's going to lose $150,000 because of his salary, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's like pocket change for these guys, and all that money that they have to pay, or that they lose, that they don't get paid, goes to NHL player assistance program. So it helps pay for players who need to go in that assistance program to get the help that they need. So it's a benefit, for that type of charity, but. Yeah, I think back to that comment or the statement that the Oilers said, and to me, it just feels like it feels like the Oilers and their fans are forgetting the fact that McDavid is not the victim in this, right? They act like he's a victim because the referee didn't call a penalty on Garland for holding him. Again, I agree there should have been a penalty for holding. I agree there should be. He was holding him. McDavid did the same thing right back to him, and then the cross-check happened. So it just appears to me that they don't see it from that perspective. They have their Oilers goggles on, so whatever happens against them seems to be the wrong thing. When really the idea is you're being suspended for the action of trying to hurt the guy. I don't care if you were trying to cross-check him or not. You were trying to hurt him because you were pissed off that you couldn't get away. And that's a penalty. That's a penalty, and that's a suspension. They compared the suspension that McDavid got to what happened with Carson Soucy in the playoffs last year when Soucy cross-checked McDavid in the face. Now, what you may not know, because you may not have seen it or not, but I'm sure there are Canuck fans out there listening that know this, but what happened in that specific play is he went to cross-check McDavid in the chest, and then McDavid was pushed into him as he did it at the same time. So from behind, McDavid's being pushed into him, and he's doing the same motion at the same time. It ends up hitting him in the face. Again, it was a suspension, and I never complained about it. The thing that they're complaining about is the fact that he only got 1 game versus McDavid getting 3. And again, the difference being McDavid had full control of his stick, had full control of his actions, purposefully hitting him in the head, whereas the thing with Soucy is Soucy didn't have control because McDavid was pushed into him.
Hypothetically, if Connor McDavid grabs Garland, throws his gloves off, grabs him by the head, in a headlock, even in a headlock, whatever, and just starts feeding him haymakers. What is the worst case scenario in that situation?
He gets a 5.
No, he'd get more than that. I mean, by the rule,
well, maybe.
book, I think you'd get 2 for instigating, 5 minutes for fighting, 10-minute misconduct.
Yeah, and you're
17
playing
minutes
the next
penalties. Because it was at the end of the game.
That's right.
Right. So, and that, from an NHL standpoint. Now, I'm talking about probably the way the player's perspective is.
Right.
That would have been a lot more of an honorable thing to do than take your stick, be controlled with it, and end up doing what he did. Right? So, the question that I have, and this is where This is where it gets tough, and it's hard to be objective. I mean, I guess I can probably be more objective because I don't really care what happens to the Oilers, realistically.
Yeah.
Or the Vancouver Canucks, for that matter. No offense, but
No,
honestly, the outcome of them doesn't matter to me until the Stanley Cup final.
That's right.
Right? Being a Leafs fan. So the thing for me is that now the fans and some media in Edmonton are saying things like, well, should Connor McDavid refrain from league activities? Shall he back out on his endorsements? Shall he not do X, Y, and Z commercials? Shall he not play in the Four Nations? Like, is this not a bad look for Edmonton?
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about?
And I mean, McDavid said in an interview, he's like, no, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Like, McDavid understands he's a professional. Like, he's not sitting here going, I'm mad at the league for suspending me. He understands what's happened. He's accepted the consequences. I mean, he may not agree with them, but he's still accepted them, and he's not playing with the team. So it's really, like you say, it's a media thing and it's a fan thing.
Yeah.
Getting way blown, way out of proportion. It's funny because even Canuck fans, you go on Twitter and you're seeing Canuck fans just be like, what is happening right now? Like, guys, this is a joke. Like,
it's confusing.
Like, seriously. And I'm not saying all Canuck fans. I'm sure there are Canuck fans out there who are like, oh, McDavid should have gotten more and blah, 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 blah. It's warranted to me, in my opinion, that they both got the same amount of games because it's the same infraction. It's the same thing. Whether you can argue maybe one was worse than the other based on the result. Neither player that got hit in the face were injured at all. Both players played the very next game that they had to play, and the intent is the same. Like, they both were trying to hit the other player with their stick. So in the end, they get 3 games. It is what it is. The way I say it is just, my message to the Oilers fans is just move on, guys.
Well, it's not just the fans or even McDavid himself. Like, he's going to obviously be in the spotlight because he is considered one of the best players in the league.
In the world, man.
In the world.
Honestly.
But there are other players that, feel the need to call him out. It was about a few days prior to the Canucks game. They played against the Minnesota Wild, and he had cross-checked Marcus Johansson,
elbow, right?
He had elbowed Marcus Johansson in the head, and Jacob Middleton, their defenseman, called him out at the end of the game, and I'll quote Middleton. He said that it's absolute horseshit. That what do you think happens? I understand the rest have a hard job, but that was chicken. I don't care that he's the best player in the world.
Yeah, I agree. And like, it wasn't a vicious elbow by any means. Like, he didn't go and like try to whack the guy with his elbow. He lifted it up his arm, gave him a little chicken wing, and it hit him in the jaw. Like, but these are the kind of things that can literally take people out of a season with concussions and stuff, right? Like, there's no such thing as a light elbow to the face. Like, it is an elbow's an elbow. You've got gear on your arm that is harder than the actual elbow bone in your arm that you hit somebody with, and you can cause some real damage.
I used to work for years ago, and I used to help sell hockey equipment. It's very,
hard.
very hard. Especially, like, they used to have Jofa, was the name of the company.
Old Jofa, yeah.
And they had a type of rounding at the end of it that if you got hit in the face with that, your nose is going to be instantly, your jaw, all of it's going to be instantly broken. Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
It's just, it's just so funny. I mean, we laugh, we say it's a joke that the Oilers fans believe what they do, but they're very passionate about it. And it's funny because it goes two ways. Like, they argue that the league needs to protect its superstars. Okay, but that doesn't mean that they should be able to get away with what they're getting away with.
So, do you guys know what player specifically came out and said the league needs to do a better job of protecting their superstars?
No.
He plays for the Edmonton Oilers. Possibly the dirtiest player in the NHL over the past 15 years.
Evander Kane.
Corey Perry.
Oh, okay.
Like, what are you talking about, man? You literally put all your weight on some guy's ankle last year in an attempt to break it.
Yeah. He literally put his knee on his ankle and put all his weight on it. There's video proof of it. Man,
this mindset by the conglomerate of maybe misinformed or non-objective Oilers fans / media / players
/ Sid Sixero
/ whatever is literally like almost the equivalent to thinking that Donald Trump could run for president. Oh.
But it's true, and the other part of it too is that they complain that McDavid doesn't get that he's not getting enough calls against him, like he's not drawing enough penalties. Well, I'll have you know, McDavid has the most drawn penalties in the NHL. So you can't sit here and tell me that when it's proven fact by a wide margin. He's drawing more penalties than any other player. So when you argue that we need to protect our stars, I'm kind of dumbfounded by the fact that statement is out there. It's baffling.
Now, just as a disclaimer, a little bit of a disclaimer, we're not crapping on Oilers fans or their media necessarily. I think what we're trying to do, the three of us collectively, and that's taking the Canucks side of it out of it for you, Joe, is just to say, hey guys, like, there is an objective opinion, and we're trying to give you ours, and it's not that your frustration isn't warranted. You don't want to be without your best player. Nobody does. But you really need to look at it from a different perspective. I think there are a lot of fans that can and do.
Yeah.
But there are a lot, seemingly, that just, they seem to be a little confused. And like I said, maybe we're out to lunch. Maybe we are. You can think that if you want to. But we're just simply offering an outside opinion on what we see. And I think, for me personally, looking at kind of the surroundings and happenings over the last couple of days, it seems bizarre.
Yeah, I mean,
Completely
it's
bizarre.
just a matter of taking your Oilers glasses off and kind of looking at the league from an outside perspective. And McDavid's one of the best players in the world. However, he's not invincible to the rules. And I think that's something that they forget about. I don't know if it's something they forget about or it's just something they don't see. Like, they don't see him breaking the rules when he's doing things like high-sticking players and stuff like that. But, you can't get away with it forever.
No, you can't. There's Oilers fans or non-Oilers fans that have been able to recognize it. Like, there's JIXEI94 on X. He literally tweeted that he cross-checked someone in the face, deal with it, and move on. And that's very much the case. There's other fans that have wrote, it's not because that he's Connor McDavid that his conduct in the ice should not be penalized. He deserved the 3-game suspension. Again, is a non-Oilers fan.
Yeah.
I know, Brandon, you're really close friends with somebody who lives in Edmonton and has a take on kind of everything that happened in that game. Do you want to kind of maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I spoke to a buddy of mine today, and I said, hey, send me something that gives your opinion, because I feel that he's quite the objective Oiler fan.
Yeah, it's interesting. I follow him on Twitter, and I agree. I think that he comes in with a perspective that is, taking off the Oiler glasses and kind of seeing that outside perspective, because that's important. I mean, it's one thing to be a fan of a team, and it's another to be a fan of the game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. This friend of mine, actually, he's who I lived with when I went to Edmonton for a year. And I wanted to just give him a bit of a shout out and thank you once again for that. Giving me a roof. That was nice. And I tell you, this guy's got some pretty cool stuff when you think about the history of the Oilers. And I mean, I'll just give a couple of examples. I'm sure he won't mind, as long as I don't give his address, maybe. But I mean, literally, like the jacket that Mark Messier wore in the Lay's commercials back in the day. He's got that jacket.
I can't be in the presence of anything Mark Messier.
We discovered that.
Yeah.
A signed retirement photo from Wayne Gretzky's retirement ceremony.
Wow, that's cool.
And things like that, right?
Yeah.
He literally just finished building an entire poker table that is Oilers orange and blue. He's got the cup holders. He's got designs, logos inside of it. Like, the thing is unreal.
I think if I remember correctly, it's got face-off dots on it and everything.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
He did an unreal job.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we're having a poker game on Saturday if anybody wants to come. So, anyway, I'll give kind of his perspective. He sent this to me today. He says, first off, I'd like to say every single fan base in sport has a few Muppets that spout off just to hear themselves talk.
Very true.
I think we all know that.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to those. Instead, for me at least, I try and focus on the fans that have a legit take and seem like they are open for a good debate. One way or the other. The play that happened at the end of the game was, in a word, unnecessary. He says, the large majority of Oilers fans that I know and read agree that the play should have been blown dead. McDavid and Granlund should each be in the box for 2 minutes, and the Oilers would probably lose 3-2.
No, that's probably autocorrect, but it's Garland, not Garland.
Sorry, Garland. Yeah, not Garland. What am I talking about?
Well, I think
it says Garland.
Oh, does it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm an idiot.
Okay.
That's what should have happened. Instead, the ref decides, hey, 20 seconds left, I'm tired, screw it. He doesn't make the call. This leads to a frustrated McDavid, who then gives clearly a healthy cross-check, right?
Yeah.
And he says he absolutely deserved a suspension. He said he thought more the 1 to 2 game range rather than 3. And, I maybe tend to agree. I'm not really sure. A game plus or minus to me, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. We talked about Morgan Riley last year, and that was a 5-game suspension. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
I thought it was pretty bad. Again, he didn't intend to, but you did it, man.
Yeah.
You did. That sucked. And he got a suspension. He ate it, and that's the way it goes. So, the 1 to 2... probably that would be the range that I would think as well, but he got 3. Maybe Peros is trying to make a statement.
Well, I heard in an interview, and I believe it was with McDavid, where he had mentioned something about having a history, because he'd been suspended once before.
Yeah.
So maybe that plays a part in it. I don't know, because Myers had the same thing.
Yeah.
Myers wasn't suspended, but he has been fined in the past, and so maybe that plays a part in it as well, and they thought it's justified to give them both the same amount.
Yeah.
Based on that.
So and I don't even think I mentioned his name. I'll mention it at the end, but it's Mike, anyway. And he said that the blow that Myers landed, he thought should have been probably a game more than what McDavid got. You can debate that till the cows come home.
I already did. I think ultimately it's the idea is they're both intent in the end, and that's why it's the same.
For sure. And he said, perhaps you can argue that. Again, you can. Totally. Media and 10% of the fan base making it way worse than it actually is in reality. And he says, it's all blown up even more when we realize that none of it should have actually happened had the referee done their job.
Yeah.
Right? And I tend to agree with that also. He says, there'll be a smattering of boos tonight when Garland touches the puck, mostly because Oilers fans are pissed at the refs for costing 3 games without the best player on earth.
Yeah.
And he says, if you're paying money to be there, everyone wants to watch McDavid, period.
Of course.
You can't really deny that, right? He's a phenom.
And it would be
He's
the
fun to
same
watch.
if he were on any other team.
That's right.
True.
Yep.
Yeah.
He says, in the end, shit is supposed to be fun. Some fans of all teams need to chill out and try to enjoy the game. And he quoted Jim Rome back in the day. He used to say, have a take and don't suck.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's what we're trying to do on this podcast.
And he predicts a 4-2 Oilers win tonight. So that's a big shout out to my man Mike Crosby. If you want to follow him on Twitter, his handle is Island_Oiler. So
thanks Mike.
Again. Thanks,
I
Mike.
appreciate that, and I think
Thanks, Mike.
that perspective is definitely an outside kind of looking in perspective where he's not being, kind of one-sided when it comes down to it. He's right. I think that if the refs had done their job and had blown the play down, maybe there's a chance that shot to the head doesn't happen. But in the end, it happened. And that's the point I'm trying to make is like, why do we need to drag on this conversation? I'm talking Oilers fans. Drag on this conversation about what should have and shouldn't happen when it happened and it's done. You don't have any control over the fact that he got suspended, and he got suspended for cross-checking somebody in the head. Anybody else would have the same problem, if they had done that. So that's the way I look at it. And I think you should treat stars the same exact way you treat every other player, because they're all playing the same game.
Otherwise, what are we doing here? Exactly. Why are we a fan of this great game, the greatest game on earth? Why are we a fan if it's not the same?
That's right.
It's the same argument as is a penalty called in regular season versus playoffs.
Yep.
Like, keep it consistent, right?
100%.
Across the board, no matter who you are.
100%. Paul, one last thought on the whole matter.
Well, as I mentioned, we got players that are in the spotlight, and somebody like McDavid, while he took responsibility, I can even quote him saying that obviously there's a lot of holding down. He holds my head down for a little bit, but I can't have that reaction. I know that everyone knows that, not the reaction that I'm proud of or that anyone wants to see out of me, and I understand it. I think because you're in these professional leagues, and especially when you are what you would consider a superstar in the face of the league, you kind of almost to a certain extent have to hold yourself to a higher standard. Now, I still don't like the idea of preferential treatment where he is getting away with certain things, at least maybe in our eyes, he's getting away with things.
Yeah.
But it's one of those kind of catch-22s where when you're in the limelight, you You can still be emotional. It's an emotional game. We know that hockey is probably one of the most emotional games, maybe besides some of the flopping and basketball and soccer. But it is a highly intense game, highly emotional game. But I look at the NHL as probably one of the elite professionalism teams in terms of the standard that they carry themselves as gentlemen and stuff like that. And so I do want to see that translate onto the ice sometimes and, react to him, but you gotta still keep your head in the game. And I know it's easy enough for me to say because I'm watching this on the outside, and I've had emotional reactions, but I'm not an NHL player making $12.5 million.
This is true. And I mean, these guys see professional doctors that help them with mental health and things like that. So keeping control of your anger and your emotions is something they should all be pros at.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, that's kind of that it's for another discussion for another show probably, but the same thing with JT Miller. I mean, JT Miller's criticized for his emotionality, being so emotional in a game or in the game in general. But, I think that's the thing that you have to master if you're going to play professional sports. You need to have your anger and your emotion under control. Now, speak of that, Paul, you are a little angry about something happening in the Major League Baseball. Let's elaborate.
Yeah, so I when I was creating ideas for us to do our podcast here, the first thing that came to my mind when it came to baseball was the Dodgers.
Are they ruining baseball? Like, don't get me wrong. The organization has huge support from their ownership, like deep, deep, deep pockets. From my understanding, they have the biggest TV contract available in the MLB. They sell out every game. Apparently, this is what I've heard, their staff is over the moon. Like their professional staff, everything from your janitors up to your nutrition coaches to your bullpen pitching coach, your catching coach, whatever, right? Your hitting coach, all the way up to your medical staff. Everything is apparently top-notch, unbeatable, the best in the league, best in the world.
They're taking care of their staff.
They take care of their staff. They take care of their players. They take care of everyone, right? Including their fans, apparently, with the massive payroll that they spend every single year. Like, does this end, or is it just, here, open my wallet?
Like, I'm fine that there's obviously the luxury tax thresholds and everything in baseball, but it's kind of getting to a point where before there was even like a salary cap in hockey, where you had maybe 3 or 4 teams that were able to get the best players in free agency every year. And yeah, it's because they had great owners. I look at even the New York Yankees during the 90s. Again, they were getting all the best players and winning World Series championships. Now, while I'm fine with, if you have the money to spend a kind of thing, but it takes away almost a disparity. It makes a disparity in the quality in the game in regards to competitiveness. Because, you have teams that are needing to develop their players, and some of these players do become superstars, some of them become middling players, some of them don't turn out at all. But when you have a team that can basically just like, hey, here's money, we want to be the best, we're going to be the best, and screw everyone else, it's not, shouldn't take away from the game, but from a fan's perspective, you get disappointment. And, the whole even Roki Sasaki fiasco with the Toronto Blue Jays and him choosing the Dodgers, as a Toronto Blue Jays fan, and, having seen them been in on Ohtani, having seen them been on Juan Soto, and now this phenom, Roki Sasaki, and lose out every single time to a team, again, like the Dodgers or the Mets that have a high payroll and took Soto, it makes you feel down as a fan afterwards.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you is ultimately, are you trying to say, really, like thinking philosophically for a second, are you thinking f*** the Dodgers, or are you thinking f*** the Blue Jays for not making these moves? Not forking out the money to get these players.
At the end of the day, I don't think it's been reported what the Blue Jays offered. It could have been more.
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing. It's so frustrating seeing this unfold, and as you say, and we can agree that we don't think that the Blue Jays management has done a good job. We've already said this 5 episodes probably out of the last 10. But they can't handcuff Sasaki and say, hey, you're signing in Toronto. The guy wants to play in L.A. He's going to go play in L.A. L.A., for all we know, could have offered him half the money Toronto did. It may not matter.
That's true.
That's where the intangibles or intangibles, I should say, come into play that you don't have control over. And yeah, it's super, super frustrating, and it makes you feel as a fan like your team's not doing anything, but maybe they did make the attempt, right? I know that I think there was 3 teams. I think the Padres were also involved in kind of the finalization. So, I mean, it really could have gone 3 ways. But yeah, is it frustrating? Immensely.
Well, I remember that in the past we've discussed frustrations with the team, and that, I asked you a question as to why do you think players don't want to sign with Toronto, or why do you think players all of a sudden don't sign with Toronto after being linked to them and stuff like that? And one of the things you had mentioned was the possibility of the fact that it's in Canada and it's just not a desirable place to play. I wonder how much of that is actually true. Like, is Toronto really that undesirable for players when you do have players like, you've got players like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's one of the best hitters in the league, right? And Bo Bichette's one of the better players in the league. And you've got like players who would be exciting to play with. But it is baseball more of an individual game when you consider the fact these players are going to, more wealthy teams and teams that can offer them more?
I would say it can be.
Yeah.
I would say it definitely can be. A lot like basketball that way. If you wanted to, I mean, what did Miami do years and years ago? Bringing in a whole bunch of players that they did. Dwight Howard, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, all at the same time. I can't. There was more players too. There was Chris Bosh, all at the same time. They basically bought their team, right? And the Dodgers are doing that now. So yeah, from an individual, you're gonna go get your own.
Yeah.
If you want to win a championship, and LA's your best opportunity to do that, that's where you're gonna go. Sasaki, in this case, he's brand new to the league. He's only 23 years old. He really hasn't done anything. He could go to LA and be terrible.
Yeah.
Like, all the scouts say that he's not going to be, and his history would prove otherwise. But players have flopped before.
It does happen.
It does happen, right? Playing in Japan is a lot different than playing in North America. And he could go to LA and they pay. Paul, do you remember what the contract he signed was? I can't even remember. If you want to look that up while I'm talking, that'd be great. But he could go there, and the Dodgers could have spent X amount of millions of dollars, and he could be, maybe us as Blue Jays fans are sitting there going, woo!
Yeah, good. Thank
avoided
God
that
we missed
one,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Well, it's because he's as young as he is. The posting for him is different than, say, a guy like Yamamoto last year who signed in LA and got a $350 million contract because you have to be a certain age when you're posting over into the MLB, and Rocky's not at that point yet. The Blue Jays actually had the best option to give the most money based upon the minimal salary that they were able to give. The Dodgers, in the end, ended up giving Sasaki $6.5 million. The Jays actually had the option to give him up to $10 million. And it would have been on 3-4 year contract, whichever on that end. And they made a controversial move with the Cleveland Guardians to acquire Miles Straw, which gave them additional international signing space to give Sasaki more prior to actually having signed Sasaki. And in the end, Sasaki chose the Dodgers. So, looks really bad on the front office of the Blue Jays. Looks amazing on the end of the Dodgers to get him for less, basically.
Almost half.
And it's one of those things where I look at the Blue Jays now and like doing comparisons because the Blue Jays have lost it to the Dodgers a few times now. It's not even just Sasaki. They were in the Ohtani sweepstakes. Tanner Scott just recently signed with the Dodgers. He's an elite reliever in the league. He was rumored to be going to the Jays. He just signed with the Dodgers. Teoscar Hernandez was rumored to possibly come back to Toronto. He re-signed with the Dodgers. And so as a Blue Jays fan, I'm looking at the Dodgers. This is where part of the Dodgers comes from, is that I want to see my team do better, improve, and what I believe will help them improve, and they have a giant standing in their way.
It's tough because, I think I compare it a lot to the NHL, actually, in a lot of ways, because, when a team has just won the Stanley Cup, everybody wants to play for them so that they have a chance to win a Stanley Cup too. And I'm sure that's probably the mindset of these players signing in LA. They're like, well, we have a chance to win at least for a couple of years, especially if we're signing multiple deals or multiple year deals. That's probably the mentality, right? They're going into it going, I have a chance to win if I sign with these guys. If I go to the Blue Jays, there's no guarantee. Well, I'm not saying that that's the reason, but there's a potential to that, right?
What's funny? Look at the rotation because we're kind of talking about Sasaki. Now, if Sasaki had actually chosen the Blue Jays, he'd probably instantly be their ace. Now, the Blue Jays do have a good rotation. They have Gossman, they've got Barrios, they've got Bassett, they've got Bowden Francis, who had an amazing end of the year.
Yeah.
But Roki Sasaki would probably be their ace. If you looked at the Dodgers rotation with him being there, and like I said, he's got a ton of potential and is well known to be almost better than Ohtani, he's almost at the bottom of the rotation. They got Ohtani at the top. They got Blake Snell next, who they signed in the offseason.
Right.
They've got this Yamamoto guy who didn't have an amazing year last year, but he was very consistent nonetheless, and he got a $350 million contract with them. They have Tyler Glass now, who was an ace in Tampa Bay, and then they have Sasaki.
That's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough.
They're going to be hard to beat.
I mean, the Jays are still in the pool for a couple players. I think, they're trying to sign like a veteran like Max Scherzer, a veteran like Vax.
I was thinking metronome when you said that.
Max Scherzer is another rumor. I mentioned the Dodgers might as well sign him too. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. you look at that rotation, and then you look at the lineup as far as hitters and sluggers go. They're going to win every game 12-1.
Easily.
Like, that's insane the way you look at it. It's like an all-star team, man. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is.
I'm curious to see what their payroll is going to be this year. It's got to be higher than last year, right? And they were the highest. They were the highest last year by about $10 million, I think.
Well, if we're looking at I'll go over the top 5 payrolls in the league. It's actually not even the Dodgers right now. That could change with more signings. Phillies have the highest by $5 million at $279 million and change. The Dodgers are next at $274 million. The Yankees are just below them at $273 million. The Mets are at $260 million, and then the Astros are at $211. So there's almost like $50 million difference between even the Mets and the Astros. It's hard to compete against payrolls like that.
It is. It's
especially
frustrating.
When you look at the lowest payroll in the league, and that's the Miami Marlins, $42 million.
Wow.
Disparity.
Doesn't Ohtani make more than that?
Yeah, quite literally.
That's insane.
Like disparity of 230 million between the top and the bottom. It's just, I find it insane. The fact that there's that much disparity in the league between the payrolls, and there's fans on X as well that I've talked about too. There's, hey Jeff, can you speak out about how unfair this coming season is going to be for the rest of the league? Baseball needs to do something about this, bro. It's not even fair at this point. LOL. So it's not even just us, talking about it, in our podcast. There's lots of fans, and probably I wouldn't be surprised even players in the league that are kind of starting to see this and feel that they have the right to do it, but it doesn't create a great image, I think, for the rest of the league.
So speaking of LA and the Dodgers, we do have a little bit of a somber note to discuss, and that, of course, is the wildfires that they experienced over there in LA. What do you think? What would you like to say about that?
First of all, unfortunately, it sounds like there's more fires that have broken out in the last 24 hours. So that's definitely something to, I don't know, hold your loved ones, don't take anything for granted, and, have a backup plan, have an emergency evacuation plan, have a kit set aside. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but, I don't even have one necessarily set up yet for us in a situation. When in our old place that we lived down in Harewood, there was a farm right next, in our backyard, and it was to the point where we were worried if that went up, would we have enough time to get some of our most important possessions and ourselves out of our home at that time. And we're talking very, very small scale, and what's happening in LA, it's nice. It sounds like they're coming together as a community, and celebrities are doing their part to help out and contribute. But and from a Canadian standpoint, I know we were one of the first ones to respond with bombers and sending down supplies and firefighters. Mexico is the same. They
bombers
sent out
meaning water bombers.
Water bombers, yeah. Sorry, let me to our American listeners, water bombers.
Yes, yeah.
And Mexico has sent support as well, which of course borders California. So it's tragic, it's sad, and the worst part about it, I think, is that they've already disclaimed that this was arson. and is continuing to be arson.
And I heard somewhere that during the fires they were finding people trying to light fires in different parts of LA and stuff like that. It's just like, what is going on? You know, the amount of people affected. There's children that don't have schools anymore. There's children, you know, or not children, but there's people that don't have, you know, means to get groceries anymore because these buildings are all burned down. So, you know, you're not just affecting, you know, a couple of people here. We're talking about entire communities not able to feed and clothe and shelter due to this. So, you know, the people out there that are of the mindset of, I'm going to go and cause you know, wreak havoc. You need to, you know, take the ones who are so innocent and incapable of protecting themselves, like children, into consideration when you're doing this damage. So thoughtless.
To have the audacity to even, you know, consider letting someone's house on fire, and in this case having it erupt, basically destroying almost like half of LA and Hollywood. When people talk about that you lose everything in the fire, you literally can lose everything in the fire. Mm-hmm. There are lives that are even being lost right now because of this. You know, it's not even just about those material possessions. If you are unable to move due to a medical condition, you know, and someone can't get to you in time, you know, it's people have died from those kind of things. It's a kind of a scary thing to think about, and it's, you know, it's almost, when you have somebody that's setting a fire, it can literally be murder.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Part of what's been concerning, because I know a bit about what's been going on with the wildfires too, because I have conversations with my dad who follows the news a lot. There were parts of LA where they, I guess they had the water turned off on certain parts of their fire hydrants. And so part of the reason why the fires have spread the way that they have in certain areas is that there was no water to connect to put them out, because they were, you know, rerouting that water to be somewhere else even before the fires even started, which is just poor municipal management.
Yeah, it's baffling.
Run a hose to the ocean.
I know. I mean,
really long.
Well, and you would look at that, right? And there's the arguments out there that it'd be for insurance claims. Well, the salt water is going to destroy things. Your city's burning down. It really doesn't matter that the salt's going to destroy the ground, destroy the crops, whatever. At this point, stop the bloody fires.
Exactly. Save lives.
If the infrastructure is not there, it's not going to matter if salt water. Yeah, like you say. You can rebuild crops. You can't rebuild an entire city. Not like, I mean, what is the population of the greater Los Angeles area? 10, 11 million people?
Yeah.
That's not even including surrounding areas.
And considering like some of the areas that are burning down, and these are like rich areas, you're looking at insurance claims that are going to be in the hundreds of billions probably for this. Once this is all done, it's going to be one of the most expensive natural disasters probably in history.
Yeah, and as of 10 days ago, I don't know, I haven't seen an update yet, but from my understanding, there's been at least 24 people pass.
Yeah. From
the outcome of these fires.
Yeah, they're reporting on the news right now that there's like more than 10,000 structures that have been destroyed, 300,000 people that have been put under evacuation, 58 miles have burned. It's just insane.
Yeah, and I mean, like I've heard it's affecting outer communities like San Diego now, other areas within the Los Angeles area. So it's definitely, you know, our hearts are with the people who are affected. You know, whether they're, you know, celebrities or not, people who, you know, who are just normal families that live in the area. Like, it's really sad. It's really unfortunate. These are things that are preventable, but we don't have the technology right now to, you know, to deal with it on a mass level where we can stop wildfires in general from happening, right? And we're in an area that's affected by wildfires every year with this, when, you know, during the summer heat when everything's dry. We see, you know, wildfires all across our province and across the country. and in the States too. Like we get the smoke for affected from those fires too. So we know all about it, and it's it's really unfortunate when you consider the fact that this is the winter time and it's happening.
We had a summer fire that destroyed a historic town
That's right.
in Jasper in Canada.
Yeah.
And again,
not just Jasper. I mean, there's other towns too.
Yeah, of course. I remember even Lytton
Yeah.
a few years ago was as well. It's important to, at least for the people and even our government, to have preventative measures in place as best as you can, or at least ways to quell the situation before it gets worse. Here's hoping in the future that what's happened here, that California and even particularly Los Angeles will have learned, unfortunately, a very harsh lesson. And
here's hoping they can rebuild.
And despite recent events, if we have American listeners, and I just need you guys to realize that, your neighbors to the north will always have your back, and we will always offer support. The whole point is to be partners.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're not going to get political about it, and I don't have myself any personal experience with wildfires or anything like that. But as you said, Joe and Paul, like in Canada and in BC specifically, we have perspective at least on the situation and how it can get out of control in a hurry and how it can be uncontainable. And it's devastating, it's heartbreaking, and we're with you.
Our thoughts, love, and prayers to all the families that have been affected by this.
Well, gentlemen, I think we can transition to a little bit more positive, not news, but more positive discussion, at least on the pod. Let's get into a little this or that. This is my little baby that I've created. This or that, basically the idea is I'm going to give you two examples and you choose one or the other in terms of what you would rather have or do or whatever. So we're going to start with specifically hockey. I've given two categories, hockey or movies, or there's also a hybrid category, which I'll get into as well. So
Hoovies?
Yeah, Hoovies. That's right.
Maki.
Or well, hockey's would work too. But in this case...
the French would be maki.
Is that a Hawaiian word? All right, so we're going to start with hockey. And, some of us are fans of the NHL All-Star Game. Some of us are not so much fans. But I'm going to give you a choice here. NHL All-Star Weekend, skills competition, or actual game?
I'm of the game over the skills competition. I like seeing some of the skill stuff, but it's just not the same kind of impactfulness as the game.
So this is a tough answer for me, and I'm chuckling because I would usually say skills competition all day long, except that I don't really like the direction the skills competition has gone in the last, say, 5 or 6 years. Previously... Some of the innovations that I do like are, like the relay where they have the saucer pass into the smaller nets, that sort of thing. I like that type of adaptation. Mm-hmm. But, when they were in Vegas a couple of seasons ago where they were in at the fountains of the Bellagio and they were like, I don't know, shooting like 100 feet across, trying to land on a certain platform. And then
that's unrealistic.
The blackjack cards, and they were trying to like wrist up, like stuff like that. That's not skills to me. That's just taking a wrist shot at a card and seeing what comes up. The hardest shot, the fastest skater, the accuracy shooting. I love that stuff. I really do. And to be honest, I like both, but I would always record or tune into the skills competition if I happen to be doing something on the Saturday and I don't get to watch the game, and not a big deal.
See, my mindset is if I have a player or two or three that are from my team in the competition, I'll watch any of the competitions. If none of them are in that specific competition, then I don't care. Like, I don't care about it. I'm interested to find out who wins or whatever, but like, really, I don't care. The actual game itself, I'll watch because I'm more interested in seeing the outcome of the game based on the performance of the players that are on my team. NHL. Now, I know where you guys are going to go with this, but NHL fights, entertaining or unnecessary?
Entertaining.
Now, the reason why I asked you this question is I was hoping you would back your answer up a little bit.
Entertaining and necessary. Okay, I will. I'll 100% back it up. I truly believe that having a player or several on your team that can hold their own is a deterrent. It's an energy booster. It's a form of intimidation. And all of those things are going to contribute to you playing good hockey and winning hockey games, ultimately winning championships. That's my blunt opinion.
there's already a lot of entertainment in the game as it is. You see the skills that are done, the hard hits and stuff that are done. But whenever a fight seems to happen in the game, it riles the crowd up. It kind of gets the players pumped up. Whoever wins the fight, or even just if it's a good bout, there's an entertainment aspect. So you're paying attention to what's going on because it very well could change the momentum of the game. There's maybe a necessary side to a certain extent, but there's been lots of talk about removing fights from the game too, which I hope never happens. But entertainment wise, like you get riled up and amped up, and that would be my reason for why I think it's entertaining.
So yours is sort of from a fan's perspective, yes, whereas yours is almost from a player's perspective.
I would agree, yeah.
And ultimately, like, I agree with both of you. I think that it is both entertaining and necessary, like you say. For me, the idea is behind it is because it can affect the way your team performs. So ultimately, you get a player who, let's say hypothetically, your team is behind. So let's say they're down 3-0. And then you get into a fight, and all of a sudden your team has legs now because you just stood up for your team and you did something to get them going. And now your team's actually got a fighting chance, That
happens all the time.
Exactly.
That exact scenario happens all the time.
All the time. And I agree, and I think that's a benefit. Now, I can see why there is an argument for people to want to remove fighting from the game. I just don't think it is the right decision, just for the fact that it is a part of the game. And hockey players know that going in. So when they talk about how fighting's dangerous and whatnot, these are things that players are signing up to do. It's no different than somebody who flies a plane. They understand that there's a danger to flying that plane and that the plane could, break down in the middle of the sky and fall out of the sky. But this is what they signed up to do. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. Okay, let's move on to movies here. Actually, I'm going to move on to hybrid movies and hockey discussion. Miracle or Slapshot?
Slapshot. Again, I'll watch movies for some historical aspect, but honestly, I want to be entertained by the movie that I'm watching, and Slapshot just hits on every part of that. The fights in it, the camaraderie between the team. At the end of the movie where he does his dance, taking off his hockey equipment, and the Handsome Brothers they became iconic with that. So I've never actually seen Miracle, but it's because a movie like Slapshot catches my attention more than, say, Miracle did.
Fair enough.
I'll go with Miracle, and I have a pretty fun explanation, I think. Paul and I differ, I think, a little bit. We both agree that and being entertained while watching a movie is probably the most important thing, or if not the second most important thing. And I think that you probably, with your personality, get more entertainment out of a comedic film than I do. I'm more of a serious role. I'm a history nut, and I'm a hockey nut. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me. To me, the historical side and the background and the things that happened, I mean, I'm sure some of it was dramatic anyway, but some of the things they profile and show you that happened in the background, the purpose, for example, behind Herb Brooks's antics,
yeah,
and his coaching style. I can't remember, but I actually just watched this movie recently, but the assistant coach was talking to the doctor in a car after one of their practices, and the assistant coach, which his name's slipping my mind right now, but he asked the doctor. He said, "You've worked with Herb for 25 years. Is he normally like this?" The doctor says, "No, I've never seen him like this before." And the coach goes, "Well, I wonder why he's doing this." And the doctor said, "Well, if they spend all their time hating Herb, they don't have time to hate each other."
Yeah,
right. Kind of a neat theory. And basically he said that, Herb Brooks did everything for a reason. Yeah. Everything was calculated.
I believe that was in his autobiography, right?
Yeah.
They were talking about it. That's where the movie came from anyways, was from his autobiography. However, I will go with Slapshot. And the fact of the matter is I'm choosing this because it's a historical hockey movie. Like it's more historical than any other hockey movie out there. Slapshot is it. Miracle, for me, I get where you're coming from in terms of a general hockey discussion, in terms of how we look at the game and stuff. It's definitely eye-opening. I just feel like because it's the U.S., it's all about U.S., I can't put myself in those shoes. And maybe that's anti-whatever, I don't care. But for me, I just feel like I relate more to Slapshot. And when I think of hockey movies, Slapshot is it for me. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on a little bit to just movies now, not sports related, but movies. Best villain for Batman: the Joker or Bane? And I'm relating this to the movies specifically. So don't think comic books in this case. Think movies. The Joker or Bane?
Tough for me because I'm an OG Batman guy.
Like Michael Keaton?
Yeah. So when you say Bane, you basically have one example.
That's true. Okay, well then let's look at it like...
If I were to pick the Joker, I would say I would probably still pick Heath Ledger's Joker over Bane.
Yeah.
I mean, in that context, we're talking about the Chris Nolan movies. And
if we're talking
generation.
if we're talking Michael Keaton's characters, then really you've got like the Joker or the Penguin or
I guess, yeah.
And that's it actually, because then after that it's not even Michael Keaton anymore.
Yeah.
So
I guess, you know what, the way I was going to justify my answer is kind of irrelevant now, because the Joker that Jack Nicholson played, I mean, was a good villain, but very different than the Joker that Heath Ledger played.
More sinister.
I'll be honest with you, I've never even seen the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movies, and I don't really intend to.
And I don't include that in this because he's not even in the same universe, right? Like we haven't even seen. I haven't seen the newest Joker movie, by the way. So I don't know if Batman's even in that movie, but I'll just say, like, I don't include him in that universe just for that reason. So you're sticking with the Joker, basically.
I'll go Joker.
Yeah,
flat out.
I'll go Joker as well. His character, especially in DC Comics too, was known to be just absolutely certifiably insane. Like, you know, you can use Michael Caine's quote from The Dark Knight that some people just want to see the world burn, and the Joker's character very much is one of those characters that there's no real explanation as to why he is who he is. He's just doing it because he's enjoying the chaos in the world, compared to, say, Bane, who actually has underlying tones and reasons for his actions.
It's funny because when I think about the two characters, I feel like Bane has more of a motive to watch the world burn, whereas with the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, I feel like he's more calculated in terms of what he's trying to do, because he's battling both sides, not just good, but good and evil, right? Because he's burning the money from all of these criminals, and he's also trying to, hurt Batman, but almost to the level of he thinks of himself as a hero, not as a villain.
Well, maybe you have to look at it as the difference between, for Joker, it's enjoyment. For Bane, it's because he's motivated.
He's seeking vengeance almost, right?
Yes.
So I look at Bane as a character physically capable of hurting Batman. And especially when I think of the movie, he literally broke his back, right? So that is physical proof. So for me, like, I look at Bane as a pretty badass character when you consider the fact that he actually did damage to Batman. Now, that being said, the Joker, played a part in trying to kill a bunch of people, like literally kill people. And he could have hurt Batman if he really wanted to. But like I said, I feel like his character almost was trying to partner with Batman, then kill him.
As long as we never do any comparisons to the Batman and Robin Bane, which he looked like he was being filled with Mountain Dew.
I feel like that was a good one. Like, those two characters, like movie villains of the same kind of family, right? Better movie decade, 80s or 90s?
I'll go 90s, and I think that's probably because I didn't live as much 80s movies until maybe later on in life.
Yeah, you're a lot younger than I am, so you would
not a lot.
You're like so much younger than me.
Oh my god! I just think
he doesn't have a conscious memory until the 90s, anyway.
I would say my experience with movies growing up, I would say the 90s really hit hard for me, and really shaped my love for movies. Mm-hmm. Having said that, we'll get into a little bit, but like trips to the movie store and stuff, I would still rent like movies from the 80s, and my dad would record on your off of TV or Super Channel or whatever it was back in the day on the tapes, the blank tapes you'd buy where you can get like 3 or 4 movies on a tape, right? And he had hundreds of those. It was crazy. Like the amount of movies he had over the years is insane. And so I was introduced to some of those, I guess, from the 80s. But I would say as far as choice goes, 90s for me.
I'll go 90s as well. Mine's probably a little more on the technical side, and the fact that you saw a real change in the 90s with the introduction of CGI and some of the stuff that they could do with some of the costumes and stuff that they didn't necessarily. I don't know if it was a creativity thing or maybe materials, whatever it was for movies back in the 80s, 70s, anything before the 90s, where something looked incredibly fake compared to movies that were done in the 90s, and the quality of things just seemed to improve with both the CGI and just maybe the innovation to make the movie. I obviously, I grew up in the 80s, and my teenage years were in the 90s, so the influence of movies on my teenage years were very different compared to my kid years, where focused on like Peter Pan and cartoons and stuff. And even to this point, part of the reason I'm making this point is that I even thought cartoons from the 80s were actually done really well compared to the CGI cartoons that they have now. But when I look at, again, live action and stuff like that, just the quality of the movies changed in the 90s.
Even stop motion, right?
And stop motion, exactly. And
a lot of, especially, I'll get into it when it comes to stop motion, but I'll let you finish your thought.
Like you're saying, stop motion, it's just the quality of it changed, and so when you see that quality of the movie making being done at that point, it gets you more engaged. And I found I wanted to watch movies a lot more. I'm getting older, but I found I wanted to watch the movies that were being done in the 90s compared to the 80s, where it didn't have the same appeal.
And I agree with all of those. I just feel like for me, when it comes to my own kind of memories and what I appreciate more, I feel like I appreciate 80s movies a little bit more. And I think it's because not because of the technical side of things, because obviously, like I said, the stop motion thing, one of my favorite movies of all time is RoboCop, which came out in the 80s. The stop motion is terrible in that movie. But the one thing I will give 80s movies credit for is story. I feel like 80s movies had a way better story than what we saw in the 90s. And I think it's because in the 90s they were so focused on the technical side of things. Yeah, that's right. And so we missed out a lot on a lot of the stories that we could have had, in the 90s. So that, for me, that's where kind of what reigns supreme for me is that mentality of all the best memories I have are watching old 80s action movies.
Explain it to me like I'm 5. I don't understand your reference to stop motion and in the context of RoboCop specifically.
Okay, so like, in the movie where we're introduced to Ed 209 for the first time, and Ed 209 is walking, and it's just this like
kind of grainy.
It's like this.
Yep.
As it's walking. That's all stop motion.
Okay.
So imagine literally a camera is taking a picture every frame.
Yeah.
That's how they do it, right? So they take a picture, move it a couple inches, take a picture, move it a couple inches, take a picture. That's stop motion. And so that's how they filmed it. So what you're actually looking at in terms of reality, there's nothing in this door frame that you're seeing, but what they've done is they've taken this, this kind of I don't know how to describe it other than there's like, imagine this, it's called forced perspective, right? Where they have like a table in the camera's view, but it looks like the floor. And the table is close up to the camera. And then there's actors kind of near a door frame, but they're farther away to make this specific little item that's sitting on the table in front of the camera look bigger than it actually is. And so that's how they did the stop frame. They basically masked off part of the frame and then did stop motion while these people are reacting to nothing. And that's how they do it. But that's high technology for its time. But of course now we have CG and all that kind of stuff, right? So
I totally understand what you're talking about. I just didn't realize there was a term for it.
Yeah.
So I get it 100%.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so one final one for you guys, and we'll go back to your roots, going back to when you were a kid and you used to go to the video store to rent a movie on a Friday night, and you have a choice of two. You're renting either a comedy or an action movie.
I will go with action, actually. My dad, growing up, that's pretty much all we used to watch was action films. We did get the occasional comedy, and I've come to love comedy movies as I've gotten older. But I tend to love action, just even for the sci-fi side of things. Like I was brought up with Star Wars and Star Trek, and I love both of them. So anyone that's a Trekkie or a Star Warsy, sorry, nerd. It just, it's engaging, right? Like I like a good laugh, but for whatever reason, you almost get more of a story out of an action film, and it's fun seeing, like, say, Jackie Chan do a backflip and fight 3 guys at once kind of thing. I find that much more enjoyable than maybe the laughs I'll get in the moment.
Well, the funny thing about that is you tend to get both genres with Jackie Chan movies, right?
That is true.
You get comedy and action, so a lot of times you are getting the best of both worlds.
See, and I prefer action for the side of the fact that they've got a Glock 17 that carries 12 in the mag, but yet they shoot 48 bullets out of it.
That's right.
That's my much preferred action.
Well, again, you're getting best of both genres when you look at it that way.
So I pick action. A lot of the same reason for you, Paul, is that my dad was hardcore when it came to movies, movie stores, etc. He literally would spend hours, and this is a man who worked shift work.
Yeah.
So 12 hours a day. On his days off, at certain points of my adolescent, early teenage years when movie stores were still a thing and popular, he would sit there on a typewriter, 1 finger each, and he would type out every movie he's ever seen. Wow. He had notebooks full, alphabetized, color coordinated, and I am not joking one bit about this.
Wow.
And we would go he'd pick me up from school on a Friday. We'd go down to, it was never Blockbuster. I know that you worked at Blockbuster, and I don't have anything against Blockbuster. We went to certain movie stores in town because of their selection.
Yeah.
Where Blockbuster had, let's say, 500 movies to choose from. A lot of the places that we would go, we're talking like 2,000, 2,500 titles to choose from, right? Mm-hmm. 2 levels of movies.
Yeah.
You have your entire upper section where it's all, like, say, new releases, and then your lower section, which is massive, by the way, and had every category under the sun, right?
Yeah.
And so we would spend hours there, and it was just an experience for me. Friday afternoon, you get picked up, you go to the movie store, Dad sits there with his notebooks for hours, and it's just like, I'm looking at this movie over here thinking, man, I've seen this 4 times. Let's make it 5. And Dad's like, no, you've seen that. You're not allowed to rent that.
Yeah.
Right? And then, Mom would be at home getting the nachos ready or the matzo sticks or whatever we're having. We're having Happy Night, garlic and cheese crackers, that sort of thing. And then that was kind of my upbringing a lot of the time is that, I wasn't a partier, especially into my teenage years. I loved watching movies, man. And action for me, yeah. Always will be action. Just hits home.
Yeah, I'm big on action as well. I mean, I grew up the same thing. And maybe it has something to do with fatherly influence, but, like, for me, definitely watching action movies. And for me, a lot, like I said, 80s action movies were big with me. I think about all my favorite action movies are from the 80s and included somebody like Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, and all the best one-liners are in those movies and stuff. But we looked for the most gunfights, the most explosions and car chases and all that stuff. So, it's exciting to think back to those memories, right? And but I have some great comedy memories too, and it's funny because my dad has never been one in my mind anyway. People who know him might disagree, but my dad has never been to me as somebody who appreciates comedy. Like, he has certain people that he loves to watch. Martin Short was his favorite, person to laugh at. And I'm just like, yeah, he's funny, but, like, he's no Jim Carrey. He's not,
Yeah.
My dad always thought, anybody who I thought was funny, my dad always said, he's an idiot. That was his response to it. So that's why we only ever watched action. So, no, and same for me. Like, I'm big on that genre. Do you guys have specific genres that kind of influenced you over the years, just growing up?
I know one of my favorites to always look out for, even when they come out now, is natural disaster.
Right.
Type movies. I loved, volcano movies, or San Andreas came out, fairly recently, within the last, I guess that's almost 10 years now, actually.
That was
really?
That was with The Rock, right?
Holy smokes, that was with The Rock, yeah. I can't believe that. Anyway, but I always kind of flock to those type of movies, The Day After Tomorrow, these End of the World, the Armageddons, the Deep Impacts, those types of movies. That was always one that I flocked to if it wasn't going to be an action movie.
I still compare that to an action movie, though, too, right? Because
it basically is.
There is
adventure.
a lot of action happening.
Adventure, yeah.
Yep. Thriller, adventure.
Yep. And if I were to like single-handedly pick out a genre, I might be creating this myself, but legal thrillers. I love courtroom dramas, thrillers, and I still do to this day, and I always will.
That's hilarious because I've always been turned off of courtroom drama type things, movies or shows. I don't know why. Maybe it's because there's nothing happening, but like I always will have an appreciation for dialogue in movies. Like we talk about, Quentin Tarantino or the Coen brothers or whatever. I appreciate the dialogue in the movies, but for some reason, courtroom type scenarios kind of make me feel like yawn, But that's just me. What about you, Paul?
Are you telling me you couldn't get down with some Law and Order back in the day?
Dun dun.
Well, obviously we talked about action. That's been kind of a big influence on my life. Sci-fi is one I've always kind of flocked to, and you can hit every kind of aspect of it. You can go with outer space. You can go with superhero, Marvel, stuff like that. I've always enjoyed those kind of films. Fantasy really catches my attention a lot. I was a big fan of Lord of the Rings when they finally made those into movies.
Did you read the books before?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
so you already knew what you were getting into.
Knew what I was getting into. Loved the Lord of the Rings. Anything to do with like dragons and stuff like that. I always found like everything kind of fantasy related stuff really enticing because it is a completely different world. At least when you're doing sci-fi, it can almost somewhat be related to real life, even though it's maybe happening in outer space, compared to fantasy where it's completely it's meant to be in a completely different
the existence
realm
of,
and universe and all that kind
the
of stuff.
existence of walking, talking trees.
Exactly. Like you'll never see ants and walking down the street here. So, like anything that had to do with something that kind of basically transported you to a different world has always been something I've really enjoyed.
Something that allowed you to use your imagination alongside with it, right? With me, I think ultimately, I appreciate all those genres, to be honest. I do. I'm a big movie buff, obviously, so I like all sorts of different, genres. But for me, the ones, especially as I get older, I feel like I'm drawn more to like spy thrillers. I've always been a fan of James Bond, always been a fan. I've loved the Bourne movies. Those kind of, especially with action. So like with Bourne movies, you've got martial arts and you've got the sort of spy factor as well. When you're thinking like stealthy kind of spy thrillers, those are really intriguing to me. And they kind of get me excited. When I see a trailer, I'm like, that looks really good. Where, there's a movie called Killer. Is it called Killer? The Killer? I think it's called The Killer. It's on Netflix, and it's a movie about a guy who's a hitman, but he kind of does it from afar. And to me, like, that's an enticing kind of idea. I don't know why. It's just something that I've always sort of appreciated. But like I said, as I get older, like there's certain genres that appeal to me more than others. Obviously, as a kid, I was big on cartoons and moved from cartoons to action movies. And then, for me, it became more kind of diverse than just plain action. Like there was more to it, and I think that's what I really kind of am drawn to. So yeah, for me, it's like those type of movies. And then like I look at Tarantino, and his movies are very action based, but they're very heavy dialogue based movies too. So there's a lot of story involved. You really have to pay attention and kind of listen in and go along with the story. So that's kind of how my like diversity grew, appreciating movies as I got older.
Yeah, I find as I've gotten older too, like stuff that's more mind bending and psychological definitely has got my attention. Obviously, you talk about I talk about Inception. Obviously,
yeah,
it's one of those films that was mind bending.
Christopher Nolan in general, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and you have a guy that wrote a really good script. So again, having good dialogue is important because I look at movies now, at least in the last probably 10 to 15 years, and it seems like the ideas are becoming less and less and less, and the dialogue is becoming more and more light and not nuanced. It's almost
the writing's
dry.
Yeah, the writing's getting lazier.
Yeah, it's getting lazier, it's getting dry, and I don't find enjoyment listening to weird sayings that people talk nowadays, like where even like you can refer to a shirt as a tarp, like that to me just doesn't make any sense.
Are you quoting Shorzy?
I think mystery is another genre. I was just thinking as you guys were talking, mystery for me, like classic M. Night Shyamalan movies, as one example, or.
You had to specify classic M. Night Shyamalan movies because his newer stuff, I'm sorry, it's not good.
Not good.
No, I would think like The Sixth Sense.
Yeah, The Sixth Sense,
Signs, yeah, definitely.
Unbreakable.
The Village to some point, although I really didn't like that movie. It was interesting to watch.
Unbreakable for me.
Yeah, that whole series, basically for me. Yeah, this exactly. Another type of film that I guess I could, if I could, rope into mystery, or like I don't. Maybe you guys have a better way to say it in a word, like, or to come up with a title for a genre. But it's like somebody who has to figure stuff out. And what I mean by that, as an example, is like, say, National Treasure.
Yeah.
Or, to a point, the Indiana Jones films. You have to figure out puzzles. Uncharted, more recently. Things like that. I love that type
those.
Of movie.
I would definitely call them mysteries, but like mystery thrillers where you've got
mystery.
you've got like there's a lot of action kind of thrown in with it as well. And it's very similar to like what we're talking about. Or what I'm talking about, even like with like the Bourne Identity and stuff, where he's trying to figure out who he is, and those kind of. And I'm very much with you on that. I think that's the cool thing about spy thrillers is you kind of go like, what's going to happen next when you have to answer or ask that question literally, throughout the movie constantly. That's to me is what makes a movie exciting to watch.
Now we've talked about obviously we're talking about genres, and we've talked about the video store experience. When you're considering like genre-wise of the movie that you want to watch, how does the cinematic experience of the movie differ from, say, renting the movie from home and watching it at home? Like, in terms of like what you're expecting from, I guess, watching a certain type of genre in the theater compared to watching the movie at home.
Yeah, so I'll touch on this, and I know that you're a big movie theater guy, Joe. You love the movie theater. For me, I was always the movie store thing, and I think one of the reasons that I liked it so much was that it was an experience. Like the entire afternoon was an event, right? Like I say, Dad would pick me up. It was never Mom; it was always Dad. Yeah. Mom didn't give a crap, really, but would pick myself up, or myself and my brother. We'd go to the movie store. We'd spend an hour or two there, literally picking out our movies, maybe a game for the weekend, that sort of thing, while Mom was making the goodies at home or preparing for us to sit down as a family and enjoy the evening. Oftentimes, we would rent like a new release or two. We would watch those together, and then we'd all kind of disperse to our areas of the house, and then we'd all watch our own movies that we rented. Because, I mean, to get all of that back in the day, you're talking less than $20. Yeah. Right? 2 new releases and like 10 older movies or used movies or whatever you want to call them. And a video game, you're like $20, right? And now it costs you $75 just to go to the movies to get a movie and popcorn.
If I take the kids to the movies, we're spending over $100.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, right? And don't get me wrong, even now I've shied away from the theater a little bit. I find I get a little uncomfortable. I find that the temperature is never regulated properly. And like the reclining seats, for example, at one of our local theaters, my ass and thighs are so wide that I'm constantly pressing the button without realizing. So I'd be sitting there watching a movie,
just starts reclining,
just go all the way, and it's like I can't stop it.
I don't know why, but I'm picturing
dumping the popcorn all over myself. Like, it's brutal, right? But. Babe, help! Right? And you can't pause it if you got to go pee. Yeah. The exceptions to that, I would say, are like blockbuster films. Like, I got to see them in the theaters, right? I went and saw Oppenheimer in the theaters because there was just no way I was going to wait. That type of thing.
It's funny because I would argue my reason for choosing a theater over home is the same exact reason, the experience in general. Because when I go to the theater, ultimately I'm going because I want to feel immersed in the film, and I can't get that at home. Like, I can to a specific degree. I have my own family room. I've got a projector, and I've got a surround sound system and all that stuff. So I do get that to a degree at home, but the movie theater, it brings just that little more intangible when I go to the theater. And I always have to sit center screen, like I have to sit in the middle. You get that whole experience so that I can hear it and I can see it as if I'm living it. And I feel like it does really depend on the genre that I'm going to see. Like if I'm going to see a comedy, I don't need to go to the theater for that because the experience doesn't matter as much. But if I'm going to see like an epic, like Oppenheimer or something that I need to feel the movie, not just see it and hear it, I need to feel it. To me, the movie theater is where it's at. It is very expensive. Like you said, it's very expensive. But it's in a lot of ways, it's worth it when you get that experience.
25, 30 years ago, when I was going, as a teenager or a young kid, you go to the movie, get your popcorn and drink and your ticket for $10.
Yeah.
And then you're done, right?
Yeah.
And it was a lot more affordable.
Your parents would give you $20 to go see a movie. You could get all of those things and have money left over.
Yeah, that's right.
Portability, it was nice back in the day for that. Especially again with we're talking about the rental stores and stuff like that, right? Like again, you can buy a Blu-ray or a digital movie now for $30, or you could have rented it back in the day for $6.
Now you can rent them now for something like, digitally you can rent them for
once digitally came in, but when there was the space in between because there was streaming and the space in between the digital films coming through, you didn't have an option but to buy it or go to the theater. I have kind of a dual experience of both watching a video at home compared to the theater. When it comes to family, and when I grew up, and the fact that I've got my child now, and obviously want a family to grow, I much rather as a family do the video at home because it is more of a comfortable experience. You're getting put into your pajamas, getting the popcorn ready. You're all sitting together and enjoying this film, and not having to be interrupted by people walking in front of you and stuff like that, like you would in a theater. Now, if I'm looking at personally, same thing, the blockbuster side of it and the experience, if I want to see a movie like Avatar when it was first came out and it was huge because it was 3D and it was colorful and all these amazing CGI stuff that was in it, I wouldn't have wanted to watch the movie home, and I didn't. I went to see that movie like 3 or 4 times in the theater because it was such a cinematic experience with that type of movie that it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, like I said, my take on them is for different reasons.
Now, I can rebuttal that just because of course, I'm a family man too, and I've got kids. Let me ask you this before I continue, though. Does your son sit down with you and watch movies?
Yes.
Has he gone to the theater with you to see a movie?
Yes.
And what's his reaction?
I think at the theater, he'll sit there and watch the movie, but he does lose interest at points, and so he's obviously poke, daddy, daddy. I'm tired, daddy.
Yeah.
Can we go? Something like that compared to at home where he can kind of walk off and play his toys for a second. I do try to get him to kind of sit
and that's
together.
That's what I was going to say. Like, my argument is like, I would love for my kids to be able to sit down and watch a movie. We went and saw the new Sonic movie a while back, and when I took the kids, I thought to myself, like, they're never going to sit through this. They never do. But surprisingly, they both sat through it, and they both enjoyed it. My kids are now 7 and 10. My daughter sits through movies no problem, but my son, who's 7, he's not even 7. He's going to be 7 soon. He's not quite 7. But he has a really hard time sitting through movies. So it's a challenge sometimes when we do family movie night at home, where we'll play like a Disney movie, something they'll be into, and they still won't sit down and watch the movie. They'll go off and play. They get bored and they want to go play with their toys or whatever. So family movie night ends up just being me and the wife watching movies, which is okay. Like, we're cool with that. It's just we try, but the kids aren't as interested. And I think that's why, for me, ultimately, I would way rather be at the theater. Even seeing Sonic, like, it was exciting to go to the theater to see it. And the kids appreciate the big giant screen and all that kind of stuff too. I have arguments with my son because he tries to tell me that the theater that doesn't have the reclining seats is his favorite, and then I'm like, no, that's the worst theater. The reason why I like this one is because of the reclining seats, right? But I will say this, and this is not bashing any company specific because I won't name them, but that one with the reclining seats, they have the worst pizza I've ever had in my entire life. I bought a pizza for my son because my son can't have popcorn because the smell of popcorn makes him gag. Oh. So he can't have popcorn. He does have snacks and he does have the drink, obviously. But I bought him a little personal pizza because they have a little pizza shop there, and got it back to his seat. And I was like, that pizza smells funny. He tried to eat it and he couldn't eat it. And I was like, well, let me try. I took a bite and I almost threw up. It was mushy. It was mushy and it tasted disgusting. I don't know what. It was just a cheese pizza. How do you screw up a cheese pizza? Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. But no, that's just my experience, ultimately. I would rather go to a movie theater and watch it for the actual experience, but I have no problem watching a movie at home because of the setup that I've created for myself, too.
Yeah, I had the opportunity when I was younger to work at Blockbuster, so I had obviously the experience of having worked in movies in regards to helping to sell, getting people interested, talking to people about movies, where you're interested in, getting recommendations kind of back and forth. It was actually quite sad for me when I had left Blockbuster before they actually closed down. It was actually quite sad for me that they shut down.
It's like closing out a part of your history.
It's like you had the opportunity, exactly, closing out your history. You had the opportunity to rent games and rent movies and have a different experience of being at the movies without actually being in the theater or being in Hollywood or something like that. It always surprised me that Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix back in the day for $50 million. It was for $50 million that Netflix had offered it. And the CFO at the time for Blockbuster, Barry McCarthy, turned it down because he thought it was a big joke. Now, looking at Netflix, I think Netflix is like a $230 billion.
I was going to say, you couldn't buy it now for $50 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a $230 billion company.
Yeah.
Very, very rough decision.
Yeah, I worked at the movie theater, especially including the one I was bashing just now. I worked at that theater as a projectionist back when we used film, and for me, I was passionate about making sure that I had good presentation in every movie that I had put out there. So that's probably where my love of the theater comes from. I mean, I appreciated the theater before then, but I think as somebody who worked in the theater and got to experience that, for me, I appreciated that much more. So it's definitely that's my choice for sure. Well, gentlemen, I think we had a pretty good podcast today. We got a lot to talk about. I mean, geez, we've been all over the place with our emotions, specifically.
Oh, yeah. Only way to go.
I could go all night talking about freaking Connor McDavid, but I'm glad that discussion is done and over with, put to bed. Maybe I haven't had a chance to see the score of the game, but I'm hoping I don't have more complaining to do next episode. We'll find out then. But until then, my name is Joe.
My name is Brandon.
And I'm Paul.
We'll see you guys next time.